Hi everyone, I am going to give you a quick tour of MySQL before you attend this course. So throughout this course, we are going to be working with a program called MySQL Workbench, which is the chief way you're going to interact with SQL queries, which is just our word for code, and also work with databases and eventually build your own database. So when you open up MySQL for the first time, you are going to see this. Um, you have a connection to a SQL Server instance, and this is known on your computer as your root account. Now, mine is going to sign me in automatically, but you might have a password prompt pop up in the middle of your screen. My best advice to you guys is please don't forget your password. It is quite difficult to reset. So I know it's not amazing password practice in general, but please consider just writing it down on a piece of paper. So I'm going to open up MySQL, and here we have all of our key bits and bobs. So you can see that the structure of MySQL is reasonably similar to a lot of other programs. Up here we have a toolbar, and we have a sidebar here. We have what we call our query pane over here, and then there are some additional bits over here and down here, which we'll get to in just a moment. So let's just start with the very basics. Up here, we can do things like open a SQL script. So you will have lots of files with a .sql extension available to you. You can open them up by going to Open SQL Script and then choosing the script that you want to open and clicking Open, and that will open your script as a new tab. You can also do things like save your script or save a version of your script. Other useful things you can do, you can open a new tab using this menu option. So you can choose this, and that will open a new query tab. But it's worth noting that this is another way to do it, and it's a bit quicker. So there you go. That's created a new tab. So that really brings us to the next question, which is our query tabs. So I'm just going to close these that I've just opened, these empty tabs. Or actually, maybe I'll keep this one open. So these tabs are a bit like tabs in Chrome or whichever other browser you're using. They're basically just separate areas where you're working on different things. So here I've got some code that is for the first session, and it contains lots of writing in two different colors. So stuff in this light blue color is known as a comment. So comments in MySQL are written with a hashtag in front of them. You can also do 2 dashes, a space, and that will also do a comment as well. So comments in code and in SQL queries are bits that don't get executed. So this is ignored by MySQL. I use comments to give a bit of context to you guys and also to myself when I'm writing my own code. So that also begs the question, how do you execute stuff? What's the code that can be executed? So down here, you can see I've got a bit of code, create database ice creams. So you can see I've actually got these all listed here, which means that I have already created these databases. So I'm just going to add a 3 to the end of this so that I don't get an error. Here's how you execute a query. You have 2 options. Either you can highlight all of the text here from the beginning to your delimiter, which is this semicolon. This basically tells MySQL, here is where the query ends. So you can either highlight this whole line and click execute, which is this lightning bolt here, and it will do that. Or you can pop your cursor in the middle of the query like this, and then use this button, which it's the lightning bolt with the cursor icon. So let's do that, and there you go, you can see. So once again, highlight, lightning bolt, or cursor in the middle, lightning bolt with cursor button. Fabulous. You'll see down here that we have got these little outcomes here. So these are called action outputs, and they either get a green tick if the execution happens successfully, or you'll get an error if you try and do this, for example. So here you can see I've got a red X, which tells me I couldn't do this query. create database ice cream 3. That's the query in question. And here is my error code. So here it says, can't create database ice creams 3 because the database already exists. And this will happen if you try and create a database that already exists or a table that already exists. Usually MySQL isn't amazing at giving you helpful error codes. It will usually tell you that there's an error in your SQL syntax. But sometimes it can be a little bit more helpful. So for example, if I get rid of my semicolon here, I will get an error down here because MySQL is really confused about where this query ends. So it will tell you sometimes if you hover over the red underlined bit, create is not valid at this position, expecting EOF, which is the end of fragment, I think, and it tells you that there is a missing semicolon. So this is usually a sign for me that I need to scroll back up and add a semicolon here. So I mentioned briefly that we have this list of databases here. A database can also be known as a schema. So a schema, just a fancy word for database. And as you can see, I have got tons of databases saved because I've been teaching this class for a long time. You will probably only have 2 or 3. And within these, you can open these up and see what's inside them. So here's my project database that I did when I first did this course. Inside the database, you can see tables. If you open up the tables, you can see all the different tables I've got. So I've got the ambulance trust fact table, the dimension date table, and so on and so forth. And if you open up the tables, you can get things like the columns. So I can see what columns I have. And as you can see, this is a really big table. It's got tons of columns in there. My other tables are a little bit smaller. So if I look at the region, you can see I've got the organization code and the region name. So you can find some useful stuff in your schemas. If you want to use a shortcut for this command, which tells you which database you need to, it tells MySQL which database it needs to use, you can double click on the database you want to use and it will do the same thing as use and then whichever the name of the database is. So it will tell you down here the schema that's being used is the hello schema. This is just a test database that I made. I think it's empty and it's highlighted in green. So those are, I think, the most important bits to know about. The only other thing that is worth knowing is to create an EER diagram. So this is a diagram of your database. So let's make a diagram of my ambulance database. We're going to go to database at the top, click reverse engineer, and then we are going to get lots of options here. So this is all fine. Keep everything as the default on this first page. Then we're going to go to the connection page. After this, we need to select the schema to reverse engineer. So I only want it to be the ambulance database. It's going to retrieve the database and everything inside it. And we are going to get the tables, the views, and any routine objects. So I think I've got some stored procedures in here that are all going to be collected and put into this diagram. And then we click execute. And it has completed the reverse engineering process. So we're going to have our diagram here in just a moment. Click next and finish. And here we should have our what do you call it? Our diagram. So, oh my gosh, this is a hot mess at the moment. But if I start to clean this up a bit, we can see there are lots of tables that are attached to this big central table. And there are other objects like this. This is a view. This is another view. This is another view, and so on and so forth. Each of these tables, so this is a table and this is a table, is related by a primary and foreign key relationship. So here I can highlight it by hovering over that line which represents a relationship, and you can see that the primary key in this table is the foreign key trust year in this table. And you can do the same here, and you might not be able to see it because it's at the top, but it will function the same for every single one of those. This is your EER